Hey guys, this is a 2,800 horsepower Chevelle built by Blazin Rodz, and who better to talk about it than the guys that built it themselves? This is Waylon from Blazin Rodz. Waylon, what is it we're looking at here? What is this build?
A contraption. No, it's our 1970 Chevelle. There's very little Chevelle left to this car, but we built this car in a year.
Wow.
Special thanks. I just want you to get this guy right in there with the white hat. That guy right there is the whole reason why we're here as well. That guy did the whole wide body on the car, sheet metal, everything, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
This car uses a lot, or utilizes a lot of 3D printing, a lot of CAD design. This whole car was designed in the computer. There's just, we could talk for about 12 hours if you really wanted to. I don't know how short we're trying to make this, but just for starts.
Whatever you want to talk about. So just as a quick background then, a lot of the time you would say was in the computer developing the car, in terms of total build time for the car?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I would say it's equal. You know, just because you design stuff in the computer, you still have to turn whatever is on your screen as pixels into real life, you know?
And problem solve along the way?
Exactly, and there's always problems along the way. Just because it's done in the computer doesn't make it just a breeze, you know?
Right.
Sometimes it actually makes it a little harder because you're like, hey man, this gap right here, on the computer says it should be that, and we're not hitting that. What's going on, you know? So it could put you in a rut in a way, you know. But just for starts, right off the rip, this whole headlight grill assembly is all 3D printed. This whole front bumper is 3D printed. All these ducts on the car are 3D printed. All this right here is 3D printed as well. So that's actually, it's not 3D printed carbon fiber. It's wet overlaid, right? So basically we use the 3D print as just a mold, but we didn't make molds. We had no time to make molds on this car. So it's just wet overlaid. So basically just carbon fiber applied with resin, and then, you know, there's your part, right? So it's not as light as a true carbon fiber part, but like I said, we are a brand new shop. We're only a year old. We all came together and started this whole shop, and we're like, hey, we need to build a car to showcase what we can do, and give us sort of a name, I guess, in the industry, and something to separate us from, I would say, the normal, right? And this is what we created in a year. So
yeah, well, I mean, this is crazy to build in 1 year. So how big is the shop? How many guys do you have working?
We have 4 guys at the shop. Yeah. So
and you built this in a year?
Computers, baby.
Okay, that's very, very impressive. So obviously we talked a little bit about the front. Now we can't ignore that engine that's in the background.
Definitely not.
So what are we looking at there?
This is a 540 big block. It's a Brodix aluminum block, Brodix heads. So it's a Brodix baby for sure. It's all Cali's internals, Cali's forged crank, Cali's rods, diamond pistons. We created everything you see on top. This is actually an original Hogan's intake that we just started with as a placeholder essentially, and then everything from there is just one-off. This is probably the only piece that's still Hogan's, and this, right? But other than that, and the runners, I should say. But big shout out to Hogan's. It's a really cool intake. It's got an intercooler in the top, right? So that's the main. There's no air-to-air intercooler on this car. It's all water-to-air. But it's got twin 8385 precision next-gen turbos. So
these are hidden in the fenders, right?
Oh, they are buried in there, yeah. So it's their brand new turbo. They're, I would say, probably equivalent to an 88. So they're actually a very small AR on the exhaust side. So we didn't want this car to have a lot of turbo lag in it. So it's a very small exhaust side. And with their new efficiency, with all their turbo wheel blade design, whatever they do over there, they're wizards. This thing will actually probably drive like a blower car. So we're not too concerned on lag. You know, everyone's like, big turbos, bro, good luck driving that around the street. It's like, well, it'll do it, you know? So like I said, the inner fenders on this car are 3D printed. This is all one piece 3D printed.
Wow.
It's a Chevelle, so normally they have 4 headlights. We actually made 2 of the headlights on the car, the intake for the turbo. So the inner fender is all integrated, one piece to feed. It's a 6-inch diameter hole, I would say, in the inner fender, just to feed the turbo. Yeah, everything on here. There's 3D printed mounts everywhere. There's a lot of 3D printed water unions underneath the intake right there. You can't really see them. Everything's buried. It's got a lot going on, man. A lot of things on this car we wanted to make dual purpose, right? So with that being said, you could probably just see right off the rip on the fuel rails, there's not 2 fuel rails on the car, there's just one, but the second stack is actually the water inlet, right? So the water comes, or this is actually the return side of the air to water intercooler in here. But yeah, we wanted to make it all as one, right? So it's also the fuel rail, it's also the water return.
Yeah, I don't want to call it like simple, but it's amazing how clean it looks, what you guys were able to package in here.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a nightmare to make all that happen. If you notice, like all the AN fittings up on here had to be modeled and get the right O-ring squashed, right? Because you're dealing with billet aluminum, it does not want to move. So to make sure everything tightened up and sealed to allow it to move in, you have a rigid part. If I keep tightening it, it doesn't really want to move that way to squash the O-ring. So there's a lot of design that went in to that right there. Just for example, the coolant expansion tank on the car, there's a radiator cap, right? But you'll also see 2 fuel regulators from Weldon that are attached to it. So if you look underneath it, it's got a 14-inch blind hole, just gun drilled all the way through. So the fuel actually returns through the same coolant expansion tank. It's divorced. There's a wall inside to keep obviously 2 fluids separate. And then we also didn't want a fuel return line just coming all the way back like a soft line or a hard line. So we actually made our own fuel return rail. So it's kind of funny, but people probably look at it, they're like, man, there's a lot of fuel rails on this car, but we try to blend everything, right? So same thing with the crankcase breathers. We made our own valve covers. Crankcase breathers are just this kind of unique thing. If you notice, it kind of matches the inner fender design as well. Right, so they kind of share the same little look going to it.
Very cool.
That actually routes all the way to the back of the car. Back of the car, I could talk your ear off on. We'll get there.
We will get there.
We will get there. But yeah, so underneath this car, actually, there's a front splitter, but there's also a front diffuser on the car as well. So underneath it, we have 2 pockets that gently loft up. And if you look down in here, you could actually see that carbon fiber tube right there is actually the sway bar. But if you notice behind it, there's those black pieces that are 3D printed out of SLS nylon glass filled. And they're notched out to fit, but that actually grabs the air from the front splitter and channels it all the way up. And it now exits that air behind the front tire to clean up that dirty air that's made there.
Okay, did you guys do any like simulated wind tunnel testing then when you were designing this?
Did not. We don't have time for that.
Okay.
And I would be absolutely lying to you if I told you I know how to do that.
Well, I mean, a lot of what you guys got here are some basic principles that have been around in motorsports for a long time, right? So you can kind of guesstimate a little bit as far as making it all work.
Yeah, this whole car, I call it precision guesswork. Half the time, no idea what the hell we're doing, but we're just figuring it out as we go.
Well, I mean, I think the results speak for themselves. You guys have a really cool car in here. So what transmission, what's the rest of the drivetrain look like that you have
so
in
it's got a 6XDX sequential transmission from RTS. So it's a whole billet case. It's a wild looking piece of jewelry.
And that's a 6-speed, right?
It's a 6-speed, yeah. Well, normally they have a big, shift actuator lever on the top. We didn't really want that. It wouldn't go with the style of the interior that we did. So we made the car have a XAP track formula electronic actuator on it.
Okay.
So we wanted everything on the steering wheel to control the car. We didn't want anybody to take their hands off the wheel while you're driving this car because you always want to be in control with 2 hands. So it's actually got paddle shifters, magnetic paddle shifters on the car that control that whole unit that's mounted on top of the transmission.
Okay, so are the rest of the controls, like turn signals, any of that stuff, it's all on the steering wheel? So in that sense, it's kind of like a Ferrari, right?
In a way, yeah. That's kind of the inspiration that we had with the whole interior of this car. We did not design the interior. That is avant-garde. Jeremy and the whole crew over there are absolute wizards.
Yeah, they've been around for a minute.
Yeah, they're great guys. All this as well. I am so happy we went with avant-garde because they share the same exact idea that we've had building this car with how they fabricate their interior. All this is also 3D printed. The door cards, the dash, everything back there is all 3D printed. We were actually there working on the car while they were doing the interior as well. So we got to see everything that they were doing, and it was amazing, man. Like there was no better person to have do the car than avant-garde because it matches the engineering and everything that we like based our company off of. They did the same thing. So we love them. They're amazing people, and they really knocked it out of the park on this car. Exhaust on here. So this is all 3D printed stainless steel. So this whole downpipe, right, it obviously goes to a rectangle, but we have a massive turbo. So it's all one big loft. I just cut it right here in the computer. We separated the wastegate on here. We call it a screamer pipe. We didn't want to run it back in because we figured this area was going to be one of the most photographed parts of the car.
Yeah, for good reason.
Exactly, right? So we also didn't want to put like a normal exhaust bellow in the car. You know, this thing needs to expand and contract. It's going to get very hot here. It's going to be cooler here. Materials like to do this, you know? So we were wondering like, hey man, every clamp on this car is a Hydroflow or a Wiggins, right? So we're like, how do we blend the exhaust? Like, what do we make for a flex joint on the exhaust, right? And one day we're just like, bro, let's make a Wiggins clamp on the exhaust. Well, we got very carried away in like trying to figure that whole process out. Adele Wiggins themselves actually make stainless steel Wiggins clamps, but you can't buy them. You have to have an aircraft manufacturer, aircraft maintenance license, and then to purchase one in of itself is $5,000.
Yeah, they're rated for.
They're meant for like a Learjet, you know. So we're like, that's out the window. And we were thinking about it. We're like, man, that would be so sick, you know, because they have like 4 degrees, like axial and just a bunch of radial 1/4 inch. Like there's so much movement in a Wiggins clamp itself, right? So one day it just popped up in our heads. We're like, bro, let's 3D print one. So we bought a Wiggins clamp, 3D scanned it, reverse engineered the whole clamp, and just 3D printed out of titanium. So
and
the
that
whole
was
clamp,
something that was outside the original game plan, but you guys managed to sort of problem solve it.
We really wanted to do it, but we had no way how to do it. It took us almost like a week to finally come to that conclusion because honestly, like I said, this whole car has been like precision guesswork. And we were like, will it work? I don't know. Well, it works. So we actually ended up purchasing a Wiggins clamp and just like popping the rivet out and stealing the clasp. You can't buy the clasp to lock it down. There's some trickery in there for sealing. There's no longer rubber O-rings in there to seal it. It's our little secret sauce. I don't know if we're willing to expose that one yet, how we're doing it. I'm sure some people will figure it out. There's a lot of smart people out there that'll definitely be like, I know exactly what they're doing. It's exactly what we're doing. If they're thinking of how they're sealing or we're sealing it, that's how we're sealing it.
Okay, but that's something that's likely to hold up better to temperature and stuff that? That's probably something that's likely better to hold temps. Okay.
Yeah. Same thing with the exhaust tip in the back. That's 3D printed stainless steel as well. Boy, we had to do this just because, man, it really unlocks a different potential. You know, it really allows you to run wild with designs on the car, especially in the time frame that we had to build this car in 1 year. It would be very hard to duplicate that on the other side and make it look the same. You know what I mean?
I mean, well, just thinking about the time you might have saved in some sense, right, to 3D print something like that. Because if you had tried to machine that yourself, I imagine that, even the bend all the metal, weld everything, make it seamless. This just makes for a much cleaner look, and you can do more aggressive, cool styling.
Definitely.
Like that.
And that's been this whole car's like theme, you know, is just like how ridiculous can we make it? And 3D printing honestly allows us to do that very fast. You know, there's really like, there's a lot of time in the car. Obviously, it was a year straight of nonstop work, but I mean, some of these cars take 4 or 5 years, right? So it sped the process up like tremendously and allowed us to run wild. It wasn't like, hey man, we can't make that. We don't have enough time to make that. It was like, pawn it off on the 3D printers, man, you know? So same thing with all this. We wanted to be very different with the roll cage. We're not sick of tubes. Obviously, this car isn't going to pass tech when it comes to the roll cage, but there is a full roll cage underneath this car. It's just hidden by the interior. Right now, it's all tucked away. It was CNC bent, laser notched, and then thrown on a fixture table at our shop and then figured out, right? After that, car was 3D scanned. B pillars are all billet. A pillars on this car are all billet. It actually bolts down into like a 4130 big upright structure that's bolted to the chassis itself. So that's how it bolts in with a bunch of 1/2-inch bolts, and it's pretty safe. Like I said, it won't pass tech, but it's also not a full-blown race car, you know, so we don't care about that.
I was gonna say it's more so of a street car, show car build, but has a lot of motorsports derived functionality to it.
Definitely, yeah. And same thing with the whole back window brace. That's all billet as well. Avant-Garde, we just designed all these parts, put them in the car, and basically pawned all this off on Avant-Garde and told them to figure it out. And they nailed it, dude. You know, like none of these billet parts were originally part of the design of the interior. They just had to work around it, and they incorporated their interior really well. It looks like we thought about it. We didn't. We didn't really have that much time to think about it.
Well, I mean, you guys, you know, you worked with somebody that knew what they were doing on their end of the right, and you guys just kind of collaborated to put everything together. So we did mention the chassis earlier. What are you guys actually running for that? I'm assuming completely custom?
No, it's not actually. Really? It's a Art Morrison chassis on here. It was just, like I said, this car really, I don't know if I actually said it, this car really didn't have like a plan. It was just like go from the very get-go and make it as wild as we possibly can. So we started out with an Art Morrison chassis. Nothing wrong with them at all, but we just strengthened the whole chassis to handle everything. There's multiple cross members that we added into the car. We strengthened the hell out of the frame horns to hold everything up on the car. But other than that, through and through, it's an Art Morrison chassis. It's C7 geometry up in the front. It's 5th gen Camaro in the rear. So it's an IRS car. It's still IRS.
Sure. Very cool.
With that being said, it's a 1450 drive shaft carbon fiber from PST.
Oh, wow.
It goes to a Tube Works third member, 9-inch. It's all billet. That's kind of why we went with it. And they use them. They're starting to use them a lot in pro mods now. So we're like, perfect for us, right? Billet matches the theme. Let's go. They're also in Riverside. We're from Orange County, so they're pretty local to us. We made our own rear end housing as well. 300M half shafts, 300M axle shafts, Series 30 CVs on this car. So it's got Ultra 4 axles in it, basically.
Wow. Okay.
Very expensive, but we wanted this car to be bulletproof. We were very afraid of breaking an axle.
Yeah, you got a lot of power
or something,
this.
you know.
Yes,
letting that baby whip around and KOing it.
I believe it.
So at the back right here, this is actually a SLS nylon glass filled 3D printed part. It would be pretty hard to make all that out of metal and make it look equal and even, right? So it's hollow inside there to allow more air to vent out behind the tire, just to keep, you know, drag down to a minimum. Like I said, never been CFD'd or anything like that. We're just like, think that makes sense. Let's go, you know? Fuel cell in the back, or I should say the diffuser in the back of the car, is actually the fuel cell. So
really?
Yeah, it's a 29-gallon fuel cell as well as the diffuser, so it's hollow.
Huh. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So back to the old crankcase breathers that like match the inner fenders. That's all routed hardline to the very back of the car into this 3D printed MJF tank right here. Right, so that's all the crankcase breather vent, whatever, going down into this tank. It actually exits all that nasty air down through here. This is another billet piece to fill out the diffuser, but there's actually a reverse NACA duct into that piece as well to allow all that nasty, you know, fumes to come out of the car.
Ah, that's clever. I love how that's also sort of hidden too. I mean, NACA ducts are kind of pretty to look at, so it's cool that it's under there, but also kind of a shame that you can't see it. So is there a whole lot of underbody panels underneath this car?
There is. Right now we don't have them on for the show just because, dude, we are cutting it close to making the car, but the whole bottom of the car is carbon fiber flat bottomed.
Oh, very cool.
It's got some 3D printed like diffuser dives to smooth out the air going to the rear fuel cell diffuser.
Okay.
But yeah, underneath the car, man, there's a video online on our Instagram of the chassis. I wish we could have the body off and the chassis next to each other because, man, the chassis is really, really nice. I'm so excited on the chassis. It's kind of a shame that we can't see it. We wanted to enter the car and battle the builders, but we had an issue with the whole starter situation on the car, and it really put us out. So we weren't gonna enter a car that doesn't like start up and run and battle the builders. That's not really what we're about. We don't want to sit there and embarrass ourselves pushing the car. It runs. We got it to run, but like I said, at the last hour, the starter welded itself shut on us. And we literally had to load the car up probably like 4 hours later. We had no way. We're still finishing the car, keep in mind. We didn't have any spare time to be like, let's pull the starter out. You know, there was none of that. So we're done there, but we did win the SEMA Best Engineered Vehicle of the Year award. So that's really exciting. I don't know how we pulled that off because there's an insane amount of people here and all these people are the toppest of the top in the industry. And somehow we pulled it off, man. I don't know how, but it's really amazing, and we're real excited about that.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Built the car in a year. Yeah, sure, maybe you didn't do everything you wanted to do, but you could also argue that you guys were reaching for the sky. So the fact that you built the car in a year and it's here with everything that you guys did to it, I would say it's very, very impressive.
Thanks, man.
I do have a quick question that's sort of, it's related to the car. What is your background to get into building cars like this, resto mods? What did you do did you go to school?
No, I did not go to school. In high school, I started working at a fabrication shop. And my dad's always had like, he's owned an automotive shop, just kind of like a general repair style shop. And one day I walked into a fabrication shop and asked if I could work there. I said, I know all my tool sizes, so I'll just be like your tool hander helper guy, right? And then from there, he ended up purchasing a CNC plasma table. And was like, hey dude, learn 2D CAD basically so we could run this machine, you know? So I was like, for sure. And I started learning it. And then from there, it kind of snowballed, man. And it really boils down to like the whole 2017 era when 3D printers like flooded the market.
Right.
I think Stratasys lost their patent on like FDM. It ran out finally. And then that's when, you know, all these 3D printers came. Well, I purchased one, had no idea that I had to 3D model stuff to actually print the stuff. Found that out and I was like, get out of here, bro. I gotta model stuff? No. So I was building a land speed car as another project at work. And we wanted to 3D print a bunch of stuff and we like had one, we were all geeked out on it, had no idea how to draw anything. And then we just started winging it and figuring it out, and tons of late nights. It was kind of another ridiculous build like this in the sense where we started the car in February, had to finish it by August. And it was a scratch built land speed streamliner, or Lakester, I should say, not a streamliner. And then from there, it just went wild, man. And then that slowly turned into designing chassis for drag cars and just moving on. And then here we are with this thing. So
cool. So yeah, self-taught to be building cars like this that are now winning awards at SEMA. It's very cool.
It's pretty exciting, man. I honestly kind of don't believe it, but here we are.
Okay, so that's a quick look around the car. Right? Are there any other details or things like that come to mind?
Get a very close look at that and let your people watch that.
Okay, so if somebody's interested in having you guys build them a car, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
I mean, I wish we had like a more formal way to contact us. I mean, we have Blazin, or
well, you guys are a brand new shop, so you're still figuring things out.
Yeah, I mean, we have zautomotivegroup.com, which is our like conglomerate, whatever you want to call it, crazy sounding company thing. But Blazin Rodz Instagram, you could contact us through, like I said, zautomotivegroup.com. And honestly, your best bet would be Instagram DM. That would work.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for your time, Waylon. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.